Hello again from my front porch. I have I don't know. I don't know if this counts as a mea culpa, or I think maybe just a clarification. But I had a couple of people that were reaching out to me that were expressing a little bit of surprise that so many of my recent episodes have had a religious tone to them, and they were kind of teasing a bit, or you shifting it into a preachy show. What's the deal? But in dialoguing with one of them, somebody who is newer into my life, that more recent friends with, came to realize that their perception of me was I'm a good person, I'm really nice, I'm very friendly, really nice fellow. However, they didn't directly connect me as a religious person. Now, on one hand, I'm okay with that because I would much rather be thought of as a Christian, not as a religious person. I do believe there is a bit of a difference there. But the point was well taken that this individual didn't associate me with some of the concepts as directly. It's not that they thought they were different, that I was not connected with. Just I had never, in their experience, I had never talked about it as much. And so then I kind of I felt really bad because I was like, wow, that's because my religious beliefs have defined who I am for my entire life, really. Because here, let me give you a little backstory. My mom attended in Jefferson, Iowa. Before I was born, when she was young, she attended a denomination called the Open Bible Church. There was one of those in Jefferson. And so then when I was born there in Jefferson, and the first 2 years of my life that we lived there in the Jefferson area, my mom took me to the Open Bible Church, which was the family's church there in Jefferson, until we moved to Carroll. And then once we moved to Carroll, they didn't have an Open Bible Church. And so at 2 years old, we moved to Carroll. My dad becomes a police officer. But she had heard that they had an Assembly of God church and that it was very similar to the Open Bible Church. And so she started to go there, and that is still our family's church in Carroll. And so all of us kids were raised there at the Assembly of God Church in Carroll, and we grew up that way. But there, when I was probably a teenager, maybe late teens, there was a book that was out, and I confess I never read the entire book. I started to read it and never finished it. But the title is what really caught me, and it referenced being a Guba, Guba. And the whole concept was a GUBA was an acronym for Grew Up Born Again, meaning that I'd been going to church since 9 months before I was born. and the concept was that you're a young person that grows up in the church setting, so that you're never away from that. And so you grow up. One of the issues with that, at least for me and personally and for others that I've known, is that you grow up having a lot of head knowledge. You know all the answers here. But this isn't where, this is where religion rests, here. And a lot of people will exploit religion for what they're devising themselves up here. A true, meaningful relationship that religion is supposed to be, but oftentimes is not. A true, meaningful relationship with a divine entity. I'm going to say God. I'm going to say Jesus because that's my personal belief system. Others have different belief systems. Totally get that. Not criticizing anybody. I'm just sharing how I feel, what my views are. And so you know the stuff here. You can go to Sunday school and you can have, the stories told, the teacher asks questions, and you can fire off the answers from here, but it's not really in here. This is where the relationship has to be, in your heart. It can't just be in your head. and the problem a lot of people fall into, a lot of adults don't get that. They focus on their world around them, and it's all here, and it's disconnected here. Well, that means that's how they lead their churches. I don't just mean minister. I mean the lay people. That's the non-official minister people. And then that creates that pattern for the young people. That young people are able to grow up, born again, gooba. I used to be what others have fondly called an evangelist encourager. You know, the evangelist comes and they do a sermon, and they'd say, you know, can I have a show of hands if you want salvation, if you need this day? And you know, as a kid, I'm always like, oh yeah, and I don't know how many times I went down to the altar, and you know, there's some people that can tell you that the time, the date, the time, the place where they accepted Jesus as their Lord and Savior. I can't do that. I do not have a definitive date for that, because I don't even know how many times I went to the altar. Now, again, to some extent, I was probably just emotionally moved or easily influenced by a really good preaching to respond. But, you know, growing up, I struggled with a lot of, again, the head knowledge here and the disconnect from what was going on here. I mean, it's not that I was a bad person. It's just that it meant more to me here than it did here. And it really wasn't until I was getting done with high school and heading off to college that it really began to click for me. And I think what happened was I went off to college, went to Iowa State. Not that that's relevant to the story per se, but I went off, I left my home, I left my city, went to another city, went to college, and I went to Iowa State, and I was around a lot of people who were not like I had grown up with. And I mean, it is an international university, and so there were a lot of different nationalities I'd never been around. There were a lot of people types I'd never been around. That, honestly, when I was at Iowa State, that was the first time that I knowingly encountered somebody who was gay, and it was a guy that I was really good friends with, involved with student government stuff, and so I mean, had my eyes opened incredibly through that experience. It was a really good experience to take me out of my little sheltered world and have to, you know, face these things in reality and, you know, what does this all mean to me? And it was during that time that I also then weighed the things about what I believed and started really delving into that. And for a while, I thought that maybe I wanted to become a minister, that I wanted to become a pastor. And I didn't pursue that. And you know, there are times where I wonder how my life would have been different if I would have. But I really believe that if that really was where I was going to go, I would have. But other things would happen and would lead me in a different direction. And now, during the same time frame, from 15, maybe close to 20 years, my wife and I at the time, we led children's ministry stuff at this church in Ames that we went to, the Assembly of God Church there. And we didn't have a children's pastor, an official designated person. Over time, the pastor of the church entrusted me with more and more responsibility and oversight for all of the children's ministry stuff. Got to the point that that was basically what I was. I was the children's pastor without actually being a pastor, because I was not ordained. I did not have ministry credentials, but I was a lay person, you know, a non-ministry minister, and filling out and enjoyed that a great deal. And during that time, I also toyed with the idea of, again, pursuing ministry and maybe being officially a children's pastor. That did not come to pass. And you know, do I regret those choices? No, not really. I mean, I don't know what I missed because I didn't do that. So it's hard to say, well, I wish I don't really have a lot of complaints with the direction that my life has gone. I feel very fulfilled with my career and those kind of things. And I look for the opportunities where I can still minister where it is an option. Because here's the secret. Sorry, my sleeve keeps rubbing me wrong here. It keeps itching me. But here's what a lot of people miss out on. People think that you have to have a title in order to minister to people. And that is not it. You know, in the Bible, in the Great Commission, Jesus says, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel." He doesn't say, "All right, everybody, I need you to go through this program. I need you to check off these boxes. I need you to satisfy. You need to take these exams, pass these exams. You need to do all this stuff, and then you'll be able to go preach the gospel." No. He just says, "Everybody, go preach the gospel." You don't have to have a title, a religious title, to go do this. You just share. You just do it. That's what you do. Now, that being said, there are church offices, evangelists, pastors, teachers within the church setting. There are these different offices, different roles that are needed in order to guide the flock, if you will. And so, with that in mind, we have these different roles they fill. Now, when I was growing up, and certainly after I was married and got more heavily involved with church stuff after I was married and had my kids, my dad, he used to all the time, he hasn't done it now for a while, but once he hears about this episode, he might start it again, but he used to call me Preacher Paul. Because I used to sing at churches. I would travel around, I'd speak at churches and sing, and did that for quite a while. That was a long time ago now. And then every time we'd have a family gathering, I was the one who was saying the grace, and I was encouraging people to always be going to church things and stuff. And so my dad would refer to me as Preacher Paul, and he didn't always mean that as a compliment, I will say. He wasn't always saying that as a good thing. But that's neither here nor there. It was sort of the reputation that I had within my immediate family and my broader family. And so, fast forward quite a bit. Now life had changed. I had moved to Des Moines and gotten divorced. My kids are both grown and out of the house. And during that time, it's been here within the last 10 years, I had some friends that wanted to get married, but they had no church affiliation whatsoever. But they knew that I was involved with church. I was directing church plays. In fact, the recent episode that you saw about the Pontius Pilate thing. So they knew that I was involved with singing and doing drama and stuff like that at my church. And so they asked if I would marry them. And I said, I would love to, but I can't. You have to be ordained. You have to have credentials to do this. Because, let me just pause here for a moment. I'm going to take my whole story thing, set it aside. Let's talk about marrying, the official piece of marrying. For a long time, it was just a religious institution. That it was, we stand here before God in heaven and, joining these two together. Well, somewhere along the line, government decided we need to get involved. We need to insert ourselves into this because we need to this can't just be a whim of a religion. This has to be a legal binding contract that we can assess a fee to. And I think I'm convinced that somehow early lawyers were involved with all this process too, because they're like, well, if we can assess a fee to people getting married, imagine how much money we can make when they decide they don't want to be married. I'm making that up a little, but still, point being that it stopped being a religious thing. I mean, there still can be a religious component, but somebody can stand up and say a lot of religious stuff at a wedding ceremony. They can officiate, but they can't sign the marriage certificate. I actually did that for one of my brothers and his wife. They wanted me to officiate their wedding, and I gave them the same spiel. I am not. I don't have the credit. So for them, for their wedding gift, I actually paid. They were getting married on a Saturday. I paid for their wedding gift for us to meet up early that morning with a local judge, with a justice of the peace, and he actually did the official signing of the marriage certificate, so it would be on the same day. And then later that afternoon, we had the full ceremony that I officiated. Now, at that point, they were legally already married. All I did was the trappings of the ceremony. I officiated the ceremony, but when I pronounced them man and wife, but that was spoiler alert, they already were. So legally, I had nothing to do with them being married, but I got to do the service, the ceremony. And so, but these other friends of mine, that's not what they wanted. They didn't have this kind of option. They didn't want it. They wanted me to marry them, and I was like, I can't. I don't have that option. So they, through their encouragement, they pointed me to an online website that I could go to and fill in some information, pay some money, and supposedly get ordained. And I was like, it's not true. So I looked it up, and they were absolutely right. And so here is my certificate. This is the certificate that I earned for like, I don't know, $40. That allows me that I am now a reverend. I am now ordained through this. I don't even remember the name of the place. The Universal Life Church. I don't know anything about it. As far as I know, they don't have hardly any religious tenets at all. They're strictly in the business of doing exactly this, of getting some of this piece of paper. I want to be very clear. This piece of paper does legally let me marry people, and I have now used it a handful of times. Not a lot, but I've used it because there are people, most of them are part of my extended family, but not everyone. Some are friends who have, again, no religious connection whatsoever. They want to get married. They want to do it seriously. They don't want to just go up to the courthouse and have a judge do it. They want it to be handled like a traditional wedding, but they don't have that. I am more than happy to step in to help make sure they get that and that we do things properly. I want to pause there, though. I am not a pastor. I'm a minister still in the sense of a layperson. This piece of paper, in my mind, does not change that. I do not equate myself to being a pastor. I have a number of friends who are pastors or have retired from being pastors. My son-in-law is a pastor. And I have the utmost highest level of respect. These people, they get put down a lot. They get made fun of. They get all kinds of assumptions and snide remarks made about them. I'll tell you, you want a tough job, be a pastor. Why? Because you have to deal with people. And you have to deal with people who are whiny, who are complaining, who are so demanding, and they assume that because you're a pastor, that means you have to be compassionate. You have to help them with their needs. And now, no, my son-in-law, my pastor friends, none of them have coached me on saying this. In fact, if they were sitting here, they'd be like, no, don't say that. But see, because I'm not a pastor, I can say those things. In fact, there's a phrase I heard once that said, if you ever find the perfect church, don't go there. You'll only ruin it. Because people do that. It doesn't matter how good the church is. Once people are there, they bring in their peopleness. That's the religion part I was talking about before. And they'll mess it all up. What this piece of paper allows me to do is because I can go down to the county courthouse here in Des Moines and I can be registered to do, so actually here in Polk County, Iowa, I don't even have to do that. The only time that this is even relevant is if there would ever be a question about the marriage. But anybody can officiate a wedding ceremony. They just can't sign the marriage license. That's what this allows me to do, is to sign the marriage license. You don't have to have one of these to do a funeral, which I've actually sadly done more funerals than I have weddings. But But for those individuals that again, have no church connection whatsoever, but want the trappings of the traditional service, I am happy to help in that regard. Now, depending on the scenario, sometimes I've even encouraged them to scope out a church. If they're a couple of years out from getting married, maybe start visiting some churches in your area and start finding one, and then have the minister of your church and your new church family join in on this day of celebration. That'd be a much better option. So I have coached some people in that direction. But again, there are some individuals that is not where they are, and they're not going to be there. But I want to make sure that God is part of their wedding, that God is part of their marriage, that God is a presence in what they're pulling together. And if that means using this little goofy online thing to help that rare occasion, I'm happy to do that. I will absolutely do that. But before you start thinking it's a big deal, I want to also point out that the same website, the same place where I got that, for another, I think it's $30 or something, 25, $30, I also became an actual certified Jedi Knight from Star Wars. So this comes from the same place as this. Yes, indeed, the same thing. So while this does give me some ability to legally sign on a marriage certificate, this is not, in my opinion, ministry credentials anywhere even close to what a pastor has. I could not use this at least I would not. Some might, I don't know. But I would not use this to try to ever say, hey, I can pastor a church. I can do it. No. But I'm sharing this because, people are like, oh, you seem to have this interest in religious stuff. Yeah, I have ever since 9 months before I was born. And now, even though I still consider myself a non-minister, I can at least step in and help in those situations where something like this might be needed. And I kind of wish I had known about it and done this for my one brother when he got married, because then I could have just done that part for them as well. But that's okay. That's all right. I still was able to help in the way that I was able to. But there have been others that now, because I was pointed in this direction, that I've been able to do that. I want to again reiterate, this piece of paper does not equate me to a pastor. And if you know any pastors in your life, you need to thank them. You need to encourage them. You need to support them because their job is tough. I know it's tough because they have to put up with you. Oh, but seriously, I am in a leadership role in the professional corporate world, and I know how difficult it can be to lead people that I'm actually paying. So I have that leverage. I have that to hold over them, that when I say I expect them to do such and such, I just remind them that, you have to do this because I'm paying you to do this, and that usually takes care of any resistance. But a pastor doesn't get that. In fact, it's the other way around. The people that they're trying to lead are the ones putting the money in the offering plate that is paying the pastor. And so, it's a very different world. And those people that the pastor trying to lead, they're there voluntarily. And yet, the pastor is supposed to be their shepherd. And if they choose not to obey, if they choose not to listen, they choose not to respect what their shepherd is directing them to do, what's the pastor's recourse? So it's a very tough job. And I have the utmost respect for individuals that have that calling, that have that passion, that have that drive. And I don't want anyone thinking that by me having this, that I'm belittling them or that I'm making fun of them or making a mockery of what they do. That's not it at all. All this silly little piece of paper does is let me step in to help somebody that otherwise wouldn't have some that they might go down to the courthouse, do the justice peace thing, and then God is not there at all. It is totally just the legal contract. That's it. And that's sad. I don't want that to happen. And so I'm happy again to do that. But so this a little bit more. This might give you a little background, a little picture, on Preacher Paul, Jedi Knight, Preacher Paul. So my religious beliefs are my Christian beliefs are important to me. I do hold to them. Now I don't go around beating people over the head with them. My experience has been that a softer approach tends to make more of an impact and allows me to be able to continue the conversation. There are some who leverage the more argumentative, debating kind of approach, and they claim it's effective. It's not effective for me. It's not my personality. It's not how I operate. And so, I find that the old cliche, you can get more flies with honey than with vinegar. That applies in this instance too. That if you want to impact somebody, if you want them to want what you've got, then you need to be modeling something that they'll actually want. And that does not mean being grouchy and mean and condemning and condescending. That is not what other people want. They don't want to come to that. So that's my take on it. Anyway, that's it. I just had to share this little bit of trivia about myself so that maybe this will help clear up, or at the very least it will enlighten for those who have not known me as much and have not known me as long, to say, oh, okay, I can. So when you make those comments about religious stuff, Christian stuff, so this is where that's coming from. Yes, correct. Good job. All right. Well, with that, I'm gonna let y'all go, and I'll see you next time from my front porch.